Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Data Standard e-commerce social event today that we have. Today we have Maria Wong from the Harvard Business Review and James Stewart from Realtor.com, and we're so excited to have this small little networking panel here just to hear about your perspectives in AI in the e-commerce industry. And I just wanted to introduce myself briefly. So my name is Catherine. I'm one of the project managers, and I'll just be helping to facilitate the event and keep the conversation going here. And so we're just going to go in a circle and introduce ourselves. So we'll start with James and then we'll go to Maria. So please go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell everybody your title and where your company is along the journey to AI right now.
Thanks, Catherine. My name is James Stewart. I'm currently the Senior Director of our Digital Marketing Analytics Group. Been there for about 2 years. We're undergoing a lot of change right now in the marketplace. COVID has significantly changed real estate as a whole. And so a lot of what we're working on right now, as far as AI, is around concepts like total consumer value and the ability to predict the likelihood of a user on our site to transact and win. And we consider the buying cycles of real estate. You're talking years, not days for some of these things, and repeat cycles being many years in a lot of cases. Beyond that, there's a lot that we're looking at as far as cross-functional nudging, right? How do we identify someone that should be being put in front of mortgages or the ability to sell? What signals and activities and behaviors are we able to model and analyze to create the best and most relevant user experience? Real estate is a very varied marketplace for someone to be in. So how do we make sure that the right tools, functions, opportunities, and listings are in front of our users? And that currently is the crux of what we are looking at and working on today.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And it's great to hear your perspective from the real estate industry area. And we're going to definitely dive deeper into that, talking about that from the COVID pandemic perspective as well, just how that's really been affecting the housing and all that. So thank you so much for sharing, James. And how about you, Maria?
Yeah, my name is Maria Wong. I'm currently serving as an advisor on the advisory board of multiple organizations, including HBR, Harvard Business Review, and some other technology companies. I'm an incoming strategy director at KPMG. Basically, I work with leading organizations in the world to help them, advise them through tricky business transformations or digital transformations, especially leveraging AI, analytics, and data. So speaking of AI maturity across different organizations, as someone who has witnessed such transformations with multiple companies or quite some companies, they can be at all kinds of stages. One common thing is that oftentimes the data is siloed, for example, and that they have to, for a transformation, they really have to do a ton of groundwork starting from data to get a different data piece together and to actually build a data warehouse, data lake, and starting from there to build the use cases, whatever the environment, the business's strategy guides, and doing implement whatever transformations that as need be. So AI oftentimes is such a shiny word. Everyone's talking about that in the field. There are a ton of really solid, really tough problems to solve. As mentioned, starting from AI, starting from data, getting the data in the right shape, and getting the different use cases working together. For example, if you want to build marketing automation, you need not only the customer data, you oftentimes need product data, you need channel data, need sales data, CRM, whatsoever. So all these different functions, they have their different use cases. You need to put them together to get them work for for this one transformation. Long story short, it's different stages. The road is long, but it's highly promising and can be highly productive if done right.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your perspective on AI within your industry. And we're going to dive deeper into the AI ML engineering side now. And I'm going to start with James and just ask you a few questions first. So you had mentioned that you work in the real estate industry at realtor.com. And so what types of tools are typically used when you need to analyze something in the real estate industry? Is there specific tools that you use that might be different from other industries at all, or even similar tools that you use?
I actually think it's less about the tools that are unique to the industry and more about some of the data sources. When it comes to real estate, we're having to marry what we're doing with marketing, what we're doing with product, and with what the macroeconomics of the industry are telling us. So the ability to marry the data from the National Association of Realtors or the MLS services or any of the real estate macroeconomic trends from the census data with our product data and the user experience is really where it starts to get interesting. In a lot of ways, the tools are very similar with what you'd expect to see elsewhere. You've got AWS, Kafka, Airflow, all the normal tools, a lot of Python scripts helping pass data around and centralized. But it's really about that marriage of data that makes it unique, right? When we start looking at how many new listings are coming in at the average home price, where we're seeing a incremental delta change in average home price for a region, right? Where the most new listings are popping up. Those data sources that are unique to the industry and not necessarily ours alone, and being able to better create proprietary models off of that data for our internal teams and our consumer experience is really what starts to differentiate ourselves from others. So our engineering teams and our product teams are looking at that data, looking at our user experience, marrying the click stream and the user behavior data to be able to better understand where should we be emphasizing our time, where can we help facilitate, what connections between the change in market versus user and consumer experience can we adapt to keep our company moving forward and growing as quickly as possible. But I'm feeling, more and more as time goes on that the methods, the tools in data science and AI are what's adopting more quickly. Not the tools, the methodologies and libraries and applications are what's evolving quickly. And the tools are actually feeling like they're becoming more and more standard over time, where there's less of a full differentiation between R and Python. We're fairly agnostic at this point internally, based off what the data engineer, data scientist wants to use, and more interested in what the ops on the outcome of the DevOps is itself. So currently that's really what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling in my space.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I know that another major concern that a lot of people worry about, especially in the e-commerce sector specifically, is the idea of just customer privacy of their data. And so what are some practices that you or your team or anybody in the e-commerce field is using right now just to best secure that the customer data is just secure right now and it's fine and nothing's going to be breached or anything?
Definitely. This is something that I feel, it's rare that I feel that Europe is ahead of us on a topic, but due to GDPR being out for a while, a lot of international companies have had to really ratchet down on their data practices, their opt-ins, the consumer options, of course, deletion processes and tagging to really evolve quickly. For us, more recently, CCPA really pushed us over the edge to understand how are we organizing our data? How do we make sure that for every bit of user data, we're making sure that our identity resolution has a master key that can communicate to all of the other keys across our systems, right? I wish I could say that all of our data is centralized and perfectly clean and organized and there's no confusion ever. But the reality is we've acquired a couple of companies, we have a couple of different ways to identify users. And so by having a consumer profile team, we have a dedicated team who builds a data store, who analyzes all the different KVPs that come in from every source against users and works to map them all together. And from there, we have the ability to, if the user goes through the opt-out flow, check that master key and then disseminate across multiple systems what that user data is, how to work with it, and how to delete it. Ironically, though, when it comes to privacy, the big reason why people are opting out of data collection is to avoid being hit with advertising, right? That's what you think you're doing. It's you're delete my data. I don't want you to have my data. Don't hit me with ads. But we don't sell people's data to anyone else. We just use it for our own retargeting. And honestly, because real estate is more about getting people onto your system the first time, and then we have other systems to retain them, new user acquisition is really the key focus. What I'm seeing is that people are choosing to actually have their data deleted through those processes in CCPA. It's a really effective process, and we'll scrub you and delete all your data. But what we were using that data for internally was to suppress you from advertising because you've already been to our site to go and capture new users. And the outcome actually is happening right now is that they're securing their privacy, but putting their cookie pool back into the open web and being hit with our acquisition advertising instead of, if they left their data in our system, removing themselves from consideration through our suppression practices. So it's one of those things where, when it comes to privacy and data collection, data storage and deletion, I feel like there's still a lot for all of us to learn together, right? We're really trying to make sure that we're thinking about that consumer experience, their needs, their privacy, and what we're doing. But it's funny to me sometimes when some of the actions we're taking to ensure that are actually backfiring because of the reality of how targeting works on and off site. So I think it's gonna be a continued point for us moving forward. We also have some additional layers in real estate that other controlled environments do as well. Real estate, medical, there's a few of us out there that are, regulated industries. So we have the Fair Housing Act on top of everything we're doing. So there is certain data that we're not allowed to collect, right? We're not allowed to look at credit score. We're not supposed to be looking at household income. We're not allowed to target down to the zip code due to redlining issues, right? So there's a whole extra layer of data consideration that we have to take in the real estate market on top of the new governmental regulations that are more blanket like CCPA. And all of it leads us again to having a core and centralized hub and spoke model with a team. Consumer profile. It's a thing that's important enough that you and your data engineering team should have at least a couple of people sitting, talking across marketing, product engineering, tech, sales, CRM, mapping and understanding how to resolve identity as much as possible. And then of course, putting it back in the consumer's hands. Privacy does need to be the consumer's choice, but we also need to make sure that we're informing them of what their choices actually have, such as that accidental retargeting or putting them back in the open web to be targeted sort of functions. Yeah,
great explanation. And it's great to hear it from your perspective since you're very heavily involved in the field. And thank you so much for your answers here. And I'm gonna speak to Maria. And so we're gonna be talking more about the marketing and sales analytics side of just the e-commerce industry. And so what are some aspects of marketing and sales analytics that you and your team need to really think about or map out before you actually pursue a project?
Yeah, it's a great question. I first want to reflect on the first point that you had raised with James and James answered regarding, say, marrying the different data together and the data privacy. They are all 100% true to marketing analytics or sales analytics as well, be it for e-commerce, especially for e-commerce or offline. I really also want to just play back that point. It's paradoxical. On the one hand, we want to serve the consumers better, to push out right advertisement for the right customers, so you don't see things that are completely irrelevant to what you want to buy and what you may be interested in, right? You want to be offered right products. On the other hand, we also need to protect the consumers from who they actually are and what they actually want. So that's just some paradox we have to work around. So thanks to all the techniques and the line of code, line of behavior that we can pick up to work around such a paradox. Speaking of marketing analytics, there are a few things, quite some things that data analytics AI can handle so much more effectively than, say, the traditional approach with highly manual work, with highly experience-based approach. For example, eventually, what marketing does is to understand at which stage a prospect or a potential customer is at along its lifetime, purchase life cycle. What we normally do when we are buying a product is that we need to know there is such a product, such a brand. So this is called awareness. And then if we know that, we may be interested, we may be exploring a little, doing some research. So that's consideration stage of the funnel. And then we move on to conversion. If after the searching and everything, we decided to buy, that's conversion. And once we become a customer, we may decide to stay, and we may even become an advocate of the product or the brand. So that's a loyalty stage. Marketing's role is to move the customers along these different stages of the funnel. So there are so many data points behind each stage, as you can imagine. For example, in the earliest, or we call it upper funnel, in the earliest stage, TV may play a role to play the ads. So, hey, there's this new style of shirts coming up from H&M, whoever, this new chicken burger from McDonald's. And you have your own preference. By you, it's consumers, demographic, location, how old, and gender, socioeconomic, every background of you, and with what channel you're interacting. Do you normally watch TV, or do you normally just watch your phone and buy online? So there are high dimensional data points behind all the stages across the marketing funnel. The marketing analytics role is really to get all the data points together and build models in order to reach whatever the objective that the marketing model is supposed to meet. So a few things my team or my clients will be really looking out for when we are doing marketing related analytics work will be, number one, be really clear what is the goal of this exercise. Specifically, which stage of marketing performance that we are driving. Is it to drive more new customer acquisition? Is it to move them to the more advanced stage of the funnel, or it is to keep old customers or having them buy more whatsoever? So goal needs to be extremely clear, and then gather data, build models accordingly. Number two would just be really back to the original point, know what data you have. Garbage in, garbage out. Data may not allow you to reach whatever goal you have from number one. So that's a critical point, can be a showstopper. And the third point will be, what are your metrics? Once you have data, you have an objective, you need to know how well your model is performing. So you need to set up appropriate metrics, be it click-through rate, be it view rate, be it whatever conversion rate. You have to have right metrics to set up to evaluate the models. And the last one will be implementation related. Really consider all the elements that you need to take the modeling output, be it uplift rate or conversion rate or response rate, and take that into practice. What the team needs to take the model into their daily work. They don't just take the model and do their campaign launching. They need a lot more things. It can be learning the new tool It can be understanding your models. It can be working around new data, new technology whatsoever. So these are the 4 key points that my team and my clients should keep in mind when they are initiating a marketing analytics product.
Yeah, and I think that's so great to hear all of your points here. And it's interesting that you also mentioned the quote, garbage in, garbage out, because that's something that I always hear from different people on the Data Standard podcast, especially. And they're always mentioning that you really need the correct, good data quality, or correct quality data, I should say, to really be able to work with the data accurately and to have the outcome that you want to see. So super interesting to hear from your perspective there. And another thing that's important in e-commerce is just pricing and just knowing the best pricing for the different products that a company might be putting out. And so I think optimization is a huge part of e-commerce. And so how do you kind of determine the best price for a product or a service?
Awesome. This is a big topic. Let's break it down into some basic elements and then talk about at a higher level how pricing can be carried out with or without optimization. I really like the terminology you already introduced here. So pricing, if we think about economics one-on-one, right? Pricing is the way to get revenue from the product or the service. Number one thing you need to have is that your price with the volume it may attract should cover your cost. If the price, which converts into revenue based on how much volume that you can attract, cannot cover your cost, then your business is a failure. So number one, that's also the most commonly used pricing technique. Is called cost-based pricing. It's really just as intuitive as it sounds. With the price point, with the potential volume, sales volume, how much you may sell this product or this service, overall how much revenue you're going to get, is that going to cover your cost or not? So the devil lies in the details. You need to know really have a right estimate of the volume, how much you're going to sell, right? And also the detailed estimate of your cost. Cost can change. For example, if you sell more, your shipment may be lower, shipment cost may be lower. So that's a basic pricing approach. Other considerations when you are pricing a product or service naturally also comes in other layers like competition. Even if you can cover your cost, can you price higher? Then you have to look around how others who are selling the similar products or services are charging. That's another intuitive element to consider. And then another area will be how much substitution there is out there. That's not just substitution from the competitors. It can be substitutable products from your own product catalog. For example, you have 2 types of water, one just different flavors. One can easily substitute another if the 2 flavors are not so distinctively different. So these are the very basic considerations and techniques people are using when do pricing. If we say, hey, you build a pricing model to actually optimize the price point, back to your original question. So that comes to the techniques of building price elasticity model. So elasticity in layman's word would just be price sensitivity, meaning if you raise the price, how much volume you are expecting to lose, meaning how sensitive your customers are with your price points. So that is to build a curve to see at which at which price point, how much volume I'm expecting, and overall, I have that curve. I can optimize my pricing so that I can raise the price point to the level of having certain amount of volume, but without risking losing volume because of the high price point. So price elasticity is basically the key element, or I would say the anchoring element in optimizing pricing. So in practice, not just the pricing one item, right? You as a producer, as manufacturer, as retailer, you have all different categories of products to price. And you cannot just price one product at one time. You have to price multiple products simultaneously. Something we have mentioned before, right? Some products may substitute other products, and they may also cannibalize other products. So there are lots of realistic or practical or empirical practice in play here. For example, a common technique used in category pricing is based on so-called key value item or key value category. What that means is that within one category, oftentimes there's so many different things, and humans' attention can be just anchoring on one or two product, and from there they get the idea, hey, this is expensive category, this is an expensive store whatsoever. If you feel like you walk in a store, you just look at a few things, then you come to a conclusion, hey, I know that this is an expensive brand, and then you leave that impression with you. That's how it works. So how you price the key value item, key value category, that's almost another basic anchoring technique in pricing, especially from category management perspective. And all these are the tactics of pricing. At high level, pricing has a ton of implication in brand strategy, in organizational, basically growth strategy, how you want to price your brand overall, depending on the stage your business is in, whether it's you're launching a new line of products, it's to have a new brand on top of existing brand. So there are quite a bit of a strategic considerations or strategies to play out as well.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear from your perspective. There's a lot of different things that play into really pricing a product or a service correctly, and it's great to hear it from your perspective here. And I wanted to also jump into the idea of COVID-19 in the past year and a half and how that's really impacted both of your industries. And so we'll start with James first, and just how has everything really affected your industry? I think I talked to you about this in our podcast before, but I'd love to hear about it here as well and how that's really impacted the industry.
No, definitely. COVID was in real estate something no one could have predicted, and no one could have predicted what it did to the market either. At first, we saw it take a nosedive like we've never seen in the last decade. I mean, if you'd looked at the numbers and you compared it to 2008, it was pretty similar for the first couple of months. Everyone froze their assets, no one was moving, everyone held their breath. Our site volume, our lead volume just dried up. And then the craziest thing happened. We actually had a record-setting year this year. We just released our annual numbers. We've never seen higher monthly volume, more leads, more revenue, more of everything. The moment people realized that COVID was here to stay, user behaviors changed in ways that, upon reflection, make sense, but at the time were surprising. The amount of people that were leaving high-density areas, moving to rural areas, the average home prices in places that were metropolitan adjacent, right? Up to about an hour outside of each of the major cities, you saw people just running for the hills, and between vacation homes, smaller towns, lower cost of living, everything, the market just was turned on its head. A lot of the models we had at the time, also, we had to adapt incredibly quickly to this new change in behavior. And even today, we're dealing with year-over-year comps that make no sense at times, right? Historically, real estate year over year is fairly consistent. The same seasons happen. Summer starts, people move. School starts, people stop moving. Christmas is a lull, New Year's is a spike, right? You can set your clock to it. Even this year, as Delta is starting to rear its head, we're looking at, what we're doing for some of the market matches, for counterfactual groups, for some of the A/B tests we're running. We're having to take COVID into consideration and say, hey, we can't look at Austin next to San Jose right now. Let's use the second place pick, Austin next to Jacksonville, because not only are the macroeconomics, population density, and rental availability is the same in those two, fairly close, but the health response is similar. It's a whole new factor to all of the data that we're looking at for everything that we're doing. It's been a wild year, and honestly, I see this continuing to impact even just some of our basic reporting, our models, and our ability to predict the future for the next 2 years to come at least, before we start getting back to anything that looks like reality.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting to hear you say these patterns and these trends that you had saw in the past year and a half in terms of home buyers. It's interesting to hear that more people, or it seems like more people were interested in moving and buying more homes. So it's interesting there. Maria, I'd also like to hear from your perspective, just how has COVID-19 impacted the companies that you've worked on? Since I know you've worked at a few various different companies.
Right. I work with CPG companies, consumer product companies and retailers. They are probably among the ones that are impacted most. It's very interesting and mixed behavior from just looking at the consumer's behavior. It's really category specific, product category specific. As we have seen that normally the retail sales dropped quite a bit because, for obvious reason, brick and mortar retail stores were closed left and right. Most of them, they were not open last year. In online space, there are categories where actually see the overcompensating effect. For example, some clients of mine, they sell personal hygiene product, personal care product, like toothbrushes, some other personal care like skincare product, and their sales were higher than ever. There can be some overcompensation from people not being able to go out to do anything else, but why don't we just stay at home and take good care of ourselves? So other behaviors such as obviously on-premise type of products and services like restaurants, entertainment, they were all hit so dramatically. We all know that. And corresponding behavior will be, we used to travel quite a bit to go to a good restaurant, to go to a big park we like, but now we tend to buy things, consume more locally. So on top of the big hit with global supply chain, there's also this localization behavior of consumers at the same time to consume local products, to buy local. It's very different than the days before, even it's very different than what we had predicted. Technology-wise, people are moving online on really unprecedented speed. I believe this is a personal experience to everyone. For one thing, we have to buy things online. For the second, it was a trend even before COVID, but it was definitely accelerated by COVID. So I'm expecting to see quite some positive trends from here. I'm hoping to see like the greener side of this event to still unfold because traffic was also so much lower. Driving and airplane traffic whatsoever, air pollution should be lower. And moving online, there's one thing is that shipments of the retailers becomes harder, right? We expect everything to be mailed in, to be sent in, not by ourselves. So that may add a little bit to the overall consumption, but I'm holding a positive trend outlook from all these different changes we have been seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested in seeing how the e-commerce space in buying smaller products just to bring home, if that trend of buying them online will still be as high as it will be years after COVID ends completely. I'm curious if it's going to be people buying more stuff in person or if they're still going to stay home and buy a lot online. So it'll be interesting to see the trends and how they move that way. Yeah. But do both of you have anything else that you would like to discuss? I wanted to open up the floor for the last few minutes if you have anything you want to discuss.
I'm just curious to see that even in a quite different space, for example, retail consumer product, from like real estate, like James working in, there are just so much similarity, right, in terms of the change in consumer behavior, in terms of the challenges or practices in using data in building models and AI. So that's something I'm just glad to see today. There's definitely a common theme in terms of how technology, data analytics serving the different areas and also consumer behavior across the different sectors.
I'm also looking forward to kind of a silver lining to these last 2 years is I'm seeing more and more leadership is leaning in with an understanding that there are macroeconomic events that we can't control. So much of what I have seen historically in AI and ML is based on the expectation of consistent behavior, consistent results. And I think that this is going to be a generational lesson for data scientists going forward to always remember that there are things well beyond our control and to make sure that we are building our models and building our work, not in a vacuum of expecting everything to be consistent and the same always, but to be ready to adapt to whatever is going to come our way. While COVID is, a globally anomalous influence on behavior, even historically, there's been smaller industry-specific, product-specific, and area-specific functions that have happened that businesses have kind of, especially if they're big enough, been able to kind of blanket over and absorb and roll through. And what I'm seeing, at least in my own company, is more and more the leaders in my data engineering, data science groups are thinking forward about what possible changes, anomalies, and disruptions could come, and how to make sure that what we're building is built around adapting, responding, and factoring those elements in. And I think that's going to be a good thing for a lot of what's coming out of this generation's new top minds, having lived through this, seen it, and influencing their future builds.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for both Maria and James for joining the Data Standard e-commerce panel today. It was so great to hear both of your perspectives on just how AI and the e-commerce industry have changed since COVID has kind of happened throughout the past year and a half. So thank you so much for both of you for joining the show. And we'll make sure to also post this on all of our social media channels, and we'll tag both of you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Catherine.